Hey guys, this is Tom Paul Tipton, your host for the Exchange Podcast. We're coming to you from Living Water Church in Conway, Arkansas. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode and say thank you to those who support this podcast with your contributions. Please like and share us on Facebook and get the word out, and like, subscribe, and share us on YouTube. Send any questions you have and join in on the exchange. And we are back, and so I have today just been listening to a podcast. I mean, that I came across the woman who does the name of the podcast is Honestly with Barry Weiss, and we're not I'm not promoting it, but I would promote it and say go listen to it. She's talking on it about a subject called the New Founders, and if you don't know who Barry Weiss is, she was a editor for the New York Times, and the reason why she left was because a lot of different things, like when the laptop came out, and New York Times had put an article on it on Twitter, and then Twitter takes it down, and so she said Twitter was becoming the editor. So I say that because there seems to be a lot of people that are beginning to wake up. I was talking to someone here on the way here to the studio, and he was talking about, he's a conservative, but he was talking about how that he had been invited to a Facebook page of liberals who, I think something like Liberals Against the Woke Agenda or something like that's the name of the Facebook page. And they're Democrats, they're liberals, but they said that whoever runs on the Republican ticket in 2024, they're going to vote for, regardless of who it is.
Interesting.
And the reason is because of the Republican, or because of the woke ideology. And that proves the fact that when you give evil enough power, they'll destroy themselves. Am I saying what? Am I saying just because they're Democrat? That's not what I'm saying. But this ultra left, the far left ideology, radical left ideology, is evil, and
it's the live and let live mindset, right?
Well, it is, and that was what It's like people are starting to see that, and they're starting to, I think, make an about face.
Well, look at the you got everybody. So the Roe v. Wade thing, that's always going to be in the news until the election is over in November, and then the next election cycle they'll bring something else up. But it's always funny to me because I'm on TikTok. Go ahead, scold me. But I see people on there and they're talking about, well, we should force men to get vasectomies, or you can stop having sex. Mm-hmm. You could do other things
or
that
just
won't
be prepared to deal with the consequences.
Go ahead and be prepared for those things. And something I started to notice, especially with people around my younger brother's age, because he and I talk. Titus, this is for you, but I noticed that sometimes they are still in the mindset, and I was too at that age. My dad always says, remember where you were at that age. And I think to myself, I think it's sad. I don't think we should, at the age of 21, 22, 23, 24, past our teen years, still wanting to do teenage things. Mm-hmm. It's your life, and I can't control you, but something that really started to change for me, and for a lot of people I know, was hunkering down and actually doing things responsibly, not only for yourself, but for what is to come. Whether that means you take somebody under your wing and you mentor them, whether that means you get married and have a kid, or you have a kid in general, and you just, hey, these are the consequences. And like a good Bible teacher once told me, not every consequence is bad. It's just they're going to happen. So my name is JaVaughn Iversen. This is the Exchange Podcast. We are super excited to be here. Bingo bango, as I have always been saying for the last 4 weeks now. I guess that's my catchphrase. Somebody pointed that out to me when I was playing Dungeons & Dragons. But I'm super excited to be here. I want to first give my condolences to the family of the ex-prime minister out in Japan. I think we can all agree that that's...
Yeah, I was actually just, that was something that I wanted to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, that's... Nobody should die for their beliefs. I don't care if you disagree with me or not. And I don't know this man's beliefs because he's from a different country. It's not on my radar. But when a political figure is assassinated, because that's what happened, it is a big deal. And I think we should all realize that people are getting fed up. I'm not saying this man deserved it. I'm just saying someone was fed up over something, and they were willing to take certain actions to deal with it. So I would say thoughts and prayers, but I know a lot of people don't like that, so I'm just going to be a little more, what's the word?
On this
fancy.
podcast, we can just say, hey, send your prayers.
Exactly. By hitting that like button. No, no, that was a joke. That was a joke. But seriously, it's no. Can you not see that it's like in Japan and with the Dutch and even here on every side of the spectrum, people are just fed up. I mean, they bombed those stones. Those what was it in Georgia, I believe?
Yeah.
They bombed those stones. They were trying. I think somebody was just trying to make a message of, hey, we're not dealing with this crap anymore. There's shortages that are supposed to be happening, and they won't let farmers do what the farmers do, which is plant crops and grow things. Right. There are farmers in America being paid not to farm.
Well, Bill Gates is under investigation because he's like the largest farmland owner in the country. And China is buying up large amounts of this.
Yep.
And, then you've got Joe Biden who's sending over something like 1 million barrels of our strategic oil reserve. That's for military. Okay, that actually is that can be that actually could be tried in criminal court. And you talking about the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He one of the things that he did, and there's some strong suspicion that China may have had something to do with this because he was for strengthening Japan's military presence in the Orient, which what that would have done if China has any, and I'm not making any predictions here. I'm not trying to say that this is all theoretical. But there are some speculations that if China has any intentions of invading Taiwan, a stronger Japan can actually curtail that.
Yeah. So look at you always want to check. Follow the money, and in this case, money is power. So who benefits the most in power in that area? Because if Japan had a strong naval presence, I'm getting flashbacks to a certain naval presence they had in the past. But if they had a naval presence that was stronger and encouraged more, China would have a tough time taking Taiwan and taking over that entire area of the seas on that side of the world. And it is theoretical, but we gotta. Something I was saying is that live and let live mentality. There's got to be a line in the sand. Mm-hmm. Something I've been noticing, especially, I got a new job. Working for the county.
Congratulations.
And appreciate it. And it's really fun. I'm having a good time getting to know different people that I would never have met ever. I definitely wouldn't have met some of these people in college because they just didn't believe to go to college. They wanted to just work. That's awesome.
Right.
And I'm learning from them, and I'm starting to realize they all have a line in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people my age have a line in the sand. I think a lot of people are they're very wishy-washy. And with that being said, there are some lines in the sand you got to set.
Yeah.
I am against abortion. That's something I'm willing to say on the podcast. I'm not an LGBTQ ally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That doesn't mean I don't love anyone.
Right.
But that just means, okay, that's just not my thing.
Right.
And so those lines in the sand that aren't put anywhere, that means when you don't put a line in the sand, then people are just going to walk up to you, slap you in the face, or shoot you in the back.
Yeah.
And
well, you mentioning line in the sand, amazingly enough, I came across a quote by Arthur Koestler. He made this quote in 1949, and he was talking about basically his love for communism. And in it, he says, I was converted because I was ripe for it, and I was living in this disintegrating society that was thrusting for faith. Now, where I came across that was from that podcast that I mentioned earlier, and that was something that she had mentioned. And when she said it, it just kind of stuck with me. And I thought, man, that's a lot right there, because what you just said about a line in the sand, the woke activists have infiltrated all of our institutions. And we covered this on a podcast here a while back, but as the church permits that to happen within the walls, because so many church leaders are afraid of just simply saying, hey, we love you, but we can't tolerate certain lifestyles, certain behaviors. It's not us, it's the Bible. We just can't do it. And so what happens is, as we shrink back from our faith, this right here is what happens. And this is what we're seeing. Now, I think the good news is I think that the majority of what they call flyover states, middle America, I don't think a lot of the BLM and Antifa and Jane's Revenge, I don't think they've really got a lot of support from a lot of the middle state people.
Well, look at the protests. Where are the protests happening when Roe v. Wade was overturned? They were happening in blue states.
Yeah.
There's no reason for you to be protesting there. You're not doing anything.
Right.
And this isn't an invitation to come to Texas or Tennessee or Arkansas or Alabama. What I'm saying is, clearly, nobody in those states are too upset about it.
Right.
Because that's just where they voted in that area where it said, hey, look, we're totally fine if you ban abortion in these states. California, if you want your state to be pro-abortion,
well,
thumbs up to you, I guess.
It all comes back to a word, optics, and it comes back to optics, and it comes back to propaganda, because you mentioning that they're doing it in blue states. If I were living in a blue state, and I think if I were a Democrat, I would be trying to lead something going, hey, guys, quit destroying our stuff. But they know they can do that without any real fear of rebuttal. And when I heard this statement, the last part is what really it says, and I was living in this disintegrating society that was thrusting for faith. That's the key right there. The society was disintegrating because it had lost faith. And we've talked about that here. As we begin to reject our faith in God or in a higher power, I'm not saying because you're an American that you're a Christian. We know that's never been the case.
Yeah.
Even in the Bible, not all of Israel was serving God. But when the nation and Israel really, there was never a time when all of Israel served God. But when the leaders had a fear for God, the nation was held together, because faith has something. It's a very cohesive. It's a very cohesive thing, and when you lose it, and Japan has been. I don't know if they've ever really been strong Christian at any time in their history.
No, but they've been strong, very conservative in their mindset and what they believe.
But one of the things they do is every year they apologize for invading China. And
I would too after what I did.
Well, but they're coming. But you can't. After a while, you've got to stop, because what you do is you begin to make people feel ashamed of who they are, and they can't do anything about that.
Yeah, if I was born in Japan and I was a Japanese man in Japan, well, duh, I would
That sounds like a song, like an 80s rock song. If I was a Japanese man in Japan, or a George Bushism.
Oh, dang it! I got compared to George Bush. Now watch this drive. No, so if I was a man in Japan growing up, and I was thinking these things, and I was like, oh, I feel really bad about what we did to what did we do to China? What did I do to China? And a lot of people are waking up to that. And I want to say something. I don't think we should call it wokeism anymore. That sounds so dumb.
I hate that term.
I think we should call it for what it is, and it's chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those of you who probably have heard on the podcast before, I like this thing called Warhammer 40,000. It is a very popular game in the UK, and the lore is very, very rich with symbolism and callbacks to ancient literature like the Bible or Shakespeare, all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the main enemies is chaos. The enemy's name is literally chaos because that's what they do. They just bring chaos however they do it, whether it's through war or famine or you name the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and that's it. And I look out and look. The line in the sand, what I'm getting at is that it's like my mom always said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And if you don't put this line in the sand and you don't have a hard, no, we are not doing that, no, we are not giving children puberty blockers, or no, we are not giving children alcohol, or no, we're not taking children to drag your kids to Trans Day or something like that. If we put a hard line in the sand, then when you try to cross that line and you get bucked back, you learn. But if we never draw a line in the sand, then chaos ensues. And when chaos ensues, there's a huge disorder of things. Guys, I don't know how many times I've seen our president gaffe. Mm-hmm. Okay, but and a lot of people would fall back on it's a speech impediment thing. Guys, if that was my grandfather, I would say, how dare you, grandma? How dare you, mom, allow my grandfather get up there and embarrass himself and the nation?
Well, you know what they would say? Because your dad, Hunter, is making billions of dollars.
And that's the other thing. We could talk about that too, because that's chaotic as well. Because it's not like the president's children in the past didn't have a checkered past, right? But here's the thing. When that checkered past was called out, and I think Obama's probably got like his children didn't really do anything crazy, good on you, Obama. But when you had like George Bush's daughter in the news, I can't remember what she was in the news for, going out and partying or something.
Yeah, just being a teenager.
But when your grown son has and I'm not, we're on YouTube, has himself in a certain like sensory tank with a narcotic that rhymes with rack and is doing things on video, and then it gets out. It's like, why is he videoing himself? Why is he doing these things? And then I get it.
Could you imagine if that would have been one of Donald Trump's kids? And I know that's a term that's been used a lot, but it's true.
No, but
if that were one of Donald Trump's kids, we would never hear the end of it.
Well, if it was any right-leaning political, look what they did to oh shucks, I'm forgetting his name. There's so many names going through but the congressman or senator who was in the wheelchair, I can't remember his name.
Chuck. Well, let's ask Joe Biden about this.
Chuck Graham, state senator's here. Chuck, stand up. Chuck, good to see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? I tell you what, you're making everybody else stand up, though, pal. Thank you very, very much. I tell you what, stand up for Chuck.
Oh my gosh, I feel really dumb. But they got him doing things in the privacy of his own hotel room, and sure, it was weird and it was strange, but like, he was trying to stand his ground, and he did. But even though he's in a wheelchair, but it's one of those things where it's like, just ignore them. People do weird stuff, and you win. But my point is that they went after that guy so hard. Oh, he's right wing. He's doing some weird stuff with his friends. But then you have this guy over here smoking peace pipe in a sensory deprivation tub, having an interesting time with himself. And it's like, dude, when are we going to call this out? When are we going to when are we going to look at the line and say you crossed it? When is somebody going to be figuratively pushed back and say this isn't okay? There are places, there are things, there's a time and a place, meaning people should know different places in which these things are okay. Last time I checked, when I was growing up, and it wasn't that long ago, I heard whatever you do in the comfort and safety behind closed doors, you should do it. And for me growing up, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I don't care if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're doing it behind closed doors, cool, keep it that way. Sure. And that was me as a teenager thinking that. There's no reason for it to be all over the place. And it's like, and I hear people say, well, JaVaughn, they have kissing scenes between hetero couples. And it's like, okay, but dude, I'm fine. I know I'm fine, and I can talk to my kids about a gay couple on screen kissing for 4 seconds. Yes, I'm talking about Buzz Lightyear. But trans stuff for kids, like Baymax, from Big Hero 6, Baymax had a scene where this trans person showed up. And yes, that was a small scene, but it's like, it was for this young kid. And yes, it's a kid who's having their period. And Baymax is asking, like, what should I get for them? And this trans person is like, oh, I like getting this. It's like, no. No, not on the kids' screen. Like, if it was How I Met Your Mother, if it was The Simpsons, if it was Family Guy, it's like, whatever. Right. But, like, you're sitting your children in front of these TV shows, which is why, I tell people, look, don't get Disney Plus. It's not it. So the thing is that when you have all these things out there and it's chaotic and you don't draw a line in the sand, like mine has always been kids. And so my biggest thing is, if you're going to start bringing this upon kids, I'm going to say no. I'm going to push you back. That's my biggest thing.
Well, you're right, because it is chaos, and we've kind of been talking about this whole thing, kind of going back to what we were discussing with Japan constantly apologizing. And The Blaze did a article about merit and individualism, and of course the head title is White Silence is White Violence. And one of the quotes there is, merit and individualism are rooted in whiteness, according to anti-racist training reportedly required for LA teacher staff. Now, I want to say reported because it's not 100% certain that they are teaching that, but I would say that it's being taught more than it's not, because one of the things that Barry Weiss pointed out in her podcast was that she has people telling her, or that when they go to school, they're told, if you're white, then you automatically come second in the conversation. Right. So we haven't fixed racism in this country, unfortunately. Now we have fixed it in a large part, but what's trying to happen now with the elites, and that's who I'm going to say is doing it, and I prefer to refer to them as the pariah. What they're trying to do is they're trying to pivot all the races against each other. And by doing so, that's where we're getting the chaos that you're talking about.
Do you feel like you need to apologize to me for your whiteness? And I'm serious, because I have my best man from my wedding, my best friend growing up. He's very left-leaning on his ideas, but he's never apologized to me for anything. He's never been like, hey, dude, I'm sorry. Because I don't want to say he's one of the good ones. I always hate that. That sounds so bad. But he's one of the guys who some
of my best friends are.
Yeah, he's a national championship debater. Like, he's really good at researching. Mm-hmm. He's really good at looking these things up. In fact, he made the joke when I was in California. He said, you can have me on the show. And it's like, I'd love to. I'd love to hear what you have to say. But do you feel guilty? Has that ever really crossed your mind? Have you thought about it? Because I've thought about it.
No, because Based on...
No, I'm saying have you ever heard that? Oh my gosh, I'm dating both of us. Have you not heard that, where it's like, oh, that's a based...
No, okay, I know what you're... Oh, yeah. Now that you jog my memory, I know exactly what you're talking about. I thought you were asking, I base that in? But now I know. Okay, yeah. I know exactly.
I was making a joke.
Yeah, and I get it. I get it now. I had to process that. But the reason I don't feel guilty is because I go back to, I always go back to what Abraham Lincoln said at the Gettysburg Address, when he said we strive for a more perfect union. I can't, you can't, no one can look forward as long as we're constantly apologizing for past sins. I can't pay for some atrocity that my great grandparents may or may not have ever committed. I mean, for instance, my dad, he's 79 years old. He grew up in the Boot Hill of Missouri, and he grew up as him and his siblings grew up as what's called sharecroppers. His dad was a sharecropper.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a sharecropper, you might as well be a slave. That's just the bottom line. Because what they did is they picked cotton, and they lived in shotgun cabins, and you may have a white family living in this one, and then right across from the porch, basically kind of like this little wind tunnel that goes through there, you'd have a black family or you have a Hispanic family.
Yeah.
And you weren't privileged to do that.
Yeah.
But what I really admired, one of the things I was talking about with Barry Weiss, one of the things I admired is she said that her dad always said, yeah, I am privileged. I'm privileged because I've got health, and I've got a job, and I've got people who love me, and I've got people that I love, and I got to be raised in the United States of America. If you're raised in this country, you're privileged.
Very much so.
So it doesn't look. Your life is what you make it. And going back to what you were talking about, did we ever bring up the young man that was shot?
No, not yet. I was going to bring that up. I'll bring
go ahead.
that.
Well, okay. So I mean, you go back to that, and it's like they want to point to all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's like the shootings that we've talked about. Those shootings take place because somebody makes a boneheaded decision. Guess what? When George Floyd was choked to death, that wasn't a smart decision on anyone's part.
Not whatsoever.
Including the police. But that doesn't mean that white people are trying, and I'm using this as just an imaginary statement here. That doesn't mean that white people are trying to keep their knee on the neck of minorities.
Oh yeah, no. So what he was talking about with the young man who was shot in Akron, Ohio, his name's Jerold Walker. Look it up. I recommend you do your research on this, but I'm just going to give you the synopsis because I want to talk about just how chaotic things are. If you're driving down the road, and whether or not a police officer turns their lights on to pull you over, or they're just driving around, you don't reach around and you fire a couple shots at them. Mm-hmm. You have now put a target on your back, not because you're black, not because you're white, not because you're Hispanic, not because you're a minority, because you're, and I'm going to say this so everybody brace yourself, you're dumb. That's not
That's right, yeah.
smart.
Right.
It's chaotic thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's chaotic thinking to think, I'm going to shoot out of this moving vehicle because I'm going to go down the scenarios that could have happened and some of the scenarios that actually did happen. You could miss the car completely. Mm-hmm. You could hit a wall. You could hit another car. You can hit the car and then whatever passenger was in said car. Mm-hmm. You could totally miss the shot, totally miss what you're trying to do, or you could have hit the officer and killed them. And I get it. People want to kill police officers. I get that. I do. I understand on both sides. I've heard both sides of the story. You shouldn't want to kill anybody. But here's another scenario that happened. When you do that, when you shoot at them, you tell them you have a gun. Mm-hmm. So in anyone's brain, they're going to think this person is armed and dangerous. Yeah. Especially when they're in a 1 to 2 ton vehicle driving at fast speeds down the highway.
Right.
This person is chaotic.
Yeah.
And so once the car was stopped at a park, I believe, and the suspect leaves the vehicle, Mr. Walker, now for whatever reason you reach down to your waistband, that's where most people have their guns. Right. Whether it's in a holster, whether it's in your waistband, whether it's in a holster on your, that's where people usually keep their guns. So I have to ask Thomas, if you saw me shoot and then you didn't see a gun in my hand, but I went to my waistband, what would you think?
I would think you're going for something.
You're going for something, and because you already know I've shot, it behooves of you to think this man has a gun. So when all the police officers showed up, because here's the thing, when somebody has a gun, police officers, unlike Uvalde, they're supposed to respond in an appropriate manner with same force, because guess what? We need to put this person down because they've already shot at us. They're now driving at top speeds. We need to deal with this. And if we could deal with it peacefully, we would. But what it ended up happening was around 90 shots were fired from all of these officers who saw and heard that he had a gun. He was going for his waistband. 60 of those shots hit him and killed him. And while he was on the ground, they were still shooting at him. I can go over what they train, what they talk about. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's just inhumane. Look, at that point, I hate to say it, you do forfeit your life after you've tried to kill someone and you've actively been doing something wrong, which is driving at top speeds down the highway and endangering many other people, not just yourself.
That's right.
You have to suffer those, what we called consequences. Yeah. This was a bad consequence. And listen, this is what we call chaos. Don't live in that chaos. This is for those who are believers and are listening to the podcast. Guys, chaos is always bad.
Right.
Because we do serve a God who is peaceful. The Prince of Peace. That is not a accidental name for Christ.
Yeah.
It is a name of peace and harmony and joy. And chaos, that's that storm that we hear about. That storm that Jesus stands up and says, be quiet. When there's all this chaos going on, that's something we should all be striving to do, is to open the Word. And those of you who are not believers or stepped away from the faith, and you say, "Oh, that never works." Have you really read the Bible for 30 days straight?
Yeah,
30 days straight. And I would, and I'm on this right now. Pastor Chris put me on this, but 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Everybody hears it at a wedding. We all know it. It's cliche, yada yada. But you read that. And that's what it is to be a Christian, to love someone, not to lean on your own understanding of things, to not boast and to not cheer when wrongdoings are happening. I'm not happy Jalen Walker is dead. I'm not happy that his life is now gone and taken away from this planet. I'm not happy he did what he did. But I am happy that people are waking up and saying, okay, this is chaotic. This needs to stop, because we need to start putting that line in the sand. The line in the sand is what you will tell the world, that you're not going to stand for this. And so if Jalen Walker wouldn't be in that chaotic situation, yes, if things were different.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's because of the color of his skin. You could be a robot shooting at police officers, and they're going to defend what they believe is right.
Well, no, it had nothing to do with the color of skin, because Bonnie and Clyde was a white woman and white man.
Oh, man, they got lit up.
They got shot each 50. It was 167 bullets were shot at them. And out of those 167 bullets, I think there was something like 50 in each person respectively. So, it could have been more, could have been less. But it was right at that. So, both Bonnie and Clyde together had 100 bullets in them. The point being is that it was, what you had was in Prohibition, you had a complete breakdown. We can argue the right idea or a good idea as to whether or not to prohibit the sale of alcohol, because that's really what a lot of that was caused from. Was
what, Bonnie and Clyde?
Well, all of that was like, not just them. They were criminals,
but all the chaos.
All the chaos because of the fact that, alcohol was illegal and people started selling moonshine. And so that started to really spark a large issue, which is why Prohibition was repealed, which, by the way, it's like the whole thing, and we mentioned this earlier in the show, about abortion. If you want to make, I was having a conversation about this with someone. If you want to make abortion law, abortion wasn't law. The Supreme Court didn't get rid of any laws. And before you start talking about men wanting to control women's bodies, it was 9 men who voted back in the 70s to legalize or say that it was constitutional for Roe v. Wade. It was a woman who voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. So the real question is it men or is it just because of the fact that what's happened here is that the Constitution was upheld? They didn't illegalize anything. They upheld the Constitution. And what we find with people who are lawless, and that's just what I'm going to say, because, I mean, when you get with all of these different groups like we've talked about, and we go back to what Barack Obama said, talking about community organizing. When we're talking about community organizing, that's what we're talking about. Communities such as BLM, Antifa, Jane's Revenge. Those are communities. And what they do is they organize those to bring chaos, what you're talking about.
Yeah, a lot of the things that, and I always encourage people to do this, read your Bibles, of course, but go ahead and read some literature about what real chaos is. Like I said, I read Warhammer 40,000 because I think it's cool, giant men in suits blowing up aliens. That's awesome. But the underlying thing is that there's this chaos going on, and all of it started was, this is where the biblical allegories come in, a son of the emperor got high and mighty and said, I can do his job. And he plunged the entire imperium of man into chaos because he thought he could do better than his father. When
Sounds
his father,
like David and Absalom.
just a little bit. And his dad said, I have a plan. We just follow this plan and we're fine. Don't touch any of these things, which was chaos-based. Don't touch any of these things and let's just do what we need to do. Rid the galaxy of all these aliens. Humanity is the rightful owners of this galaxy. We can do it. We could do it together. It's going to be great. And then you have this son. His name is Horus. Great read. If you're going to read anything, I would just say read Heresy Rising. And you have this son who just says, I can do better. And there's a lot of people who, I'm going to say, are fatherless or despise their parents or think they can do better than the generations before us. And they say, I can do better. I can do this better. I know I can. And the thing is, we can't. I am 27 years old, okay, and I am in charge of the youth group here at Living Water Church Conway. And let me tell you something. There are people who are 10 years younger than me, and they haven't a clue what to do, okay? I am 50 years younger than some of the people who are in charge in Washington. And, there's some of them that I say, I don't think they know what they're doing. And there are some of them who have some sound arguments on both the left and the right. And I have to respect that. That's where they're at. And if it's my senator who's doing stupid stuff, I'm going to vote him out because I can do that. Or I can run for local office, which we'll talk about that in another podcast. But, you got these things where us younger generation people, we're not that scary. We're not that profound. Everything has been done under the sun before. Okay? Yeah. And so I think when the younger generations get too, I think there is a thing of too much information. And it makes people prideful, and it makes them really worry about first world problems, which I think first world problems, if I was to give a definition of my own terms on it, first world problems are only a thing when you live in a privileged country, because that's why they're called first world problems. But your coffee wasn't hot this morning, or, you accidentally untied your shoe while you were walking.
Or you drive your Mercedes off into a swimming pool because it was the wrong color.
And yeah, right. Or, it's too hot today, so I'm just going to have to go home and change. And when you get too comfortable, you get to think like, oh, this is a human right. This is a human right. That's a human right. Not everything's a human right. Some of these things are just choices.
Right.
All right? I'm not saying, so when I say choices, and I think you can agree with me on this, I'm not saying you're making the decision to be gay. I'm saying you're making the decision to do the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and that's just where I stand. And people are going to say, well, what about my feelings? And me and my older brother have told a younger brother at one point, it's never been about feelings.
No.
It's always been about your actions.
Right. No, you're right. And that's, you mentioned about people with sound arguments. I'm okay with people with sound arguments. If I'm wrong about something, I'm willing to come back and say, hey, Maybe that's a better idea, but what I want is a debate. What I want is a discussion. What I don't want is you decide you disagree with me, so therefore you want to cancel me. You want to get rid of you want to kick me off all social media platforms. You want me to lose my job. I don't want to see that for you. The Bible tells us, come and let us reason together.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to reason. We have to learn how to make this life work, because we're in it together. And life's hard. There's nothing about life that's easy. Well, there are a few things that's enjoyable, but the genuine, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of life, it's not easy. But it can be easier.
Yeah.
But the only way we can do that is when we peacefully decide we're going to come together and we're going to say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, but instead of like AOC, right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, first thing she does is go and blame fundamentalist Christians. It wasn't fundamentalist Christians who did that.
Yeah.
It was the Constitution being upheld, and I because I am a Christian, and this is a Christian podcast, and we do represent a church here in Conway, Living Water. I'm going to say this: most of what we're dealing with people that just get irate and lose their mind over this stuff, that is the spirit of the age that's driving that. Yeah, it is demonic. It's not. That's why Paul tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And we've always got to remember that when it seems like that there are those that are doing things out of hate and vitriol towards us, they do, but it's the spirit that's driving them that hates us.
Yeah, the reason why the Bible talks about not being filled with too much wine and allowing a spirit to dwell within you that is not right. We're getting close to the end, but I think I want to share. I want to share this because I think it's important to share testimonies as much as you can, so that we can all just understand things. In college, I had a drinking problem, and when I went to a wedding for my brother, I drank again, and I said some words to one of my younger brothers, and I hurt them really badly. And he's forgiven me. The other brothers, we've talked about it. That happened, but it really grew me. The reality is that I realized I allowed myself to get back into that nature, that spirit mind of I'm better than you, and therefore I'm going to talk down to you. Yeah. And a lot of people I see are doing that just without alcohol, mm-hmm. Because before I was in the Word. I was fellowshipping with people. I was studying. I was really digging in. But it happens to anybody if you're not careful and you let your guard down. And so some of these people have just given into that. And, the scripture talks about, God gives them over to those passions and desires, because at that point, you can't, God's not going to make you love him. Mm-hmm. God's not going to make you do anything. I had to choose to look at my wife in the eye and say, listen, alcohol is done. Yeah. We are not at all. Okay. That is not a thing. And it's because I'm weak with it. And I can admit that. It's okay for me to admit that. I know for a fact that the Lord has made me stronger because I can admit that. And I think that's something some people don't want to admit, is that you were weak and you made a decision off of an emotion. I mean, you talk to any of the best fighters in the world, if they're still cognizant, taking shots to the head. But if you talk to any fighter and you ask them, okay, that time you lost, what happened? I lost my composure. Mm-hmm. I gave in to my emotions. Mm-hmm. You watch the Star Wars episodes, and what do they say about Anakin Skywalker turning to the dark side? He gave into his emotions, fear, hatred, anger, all those different things that he gave into, and it turned him into Darth Vader. That is an allegory of I look at it as an allegory to, that's your soul. Mm-hmm. You start out as the chosen one. You're this great being that God took his time to build up. And when you give into those emotions, it can be destructive, not just for you, but for other people. Mm-hmm. And so you're not changing anything ever if you just yell at somebody and say, you're racist, or you just want to force women into pregnancies. You just want to, you're not changing. You change things by sitting down and reasoning with each other, because I know for a fact that I'd be willing to listen to somebody tell me where they stand on abortion, and whether they change my mind or not, we were able to talk it out.
Right.
And if because this is how our country works, if enough people are reasoned with and the votes go a certain way, you can have your legal abortion in this state. You know, that's just how things work. So it comes to the point where it's like Thomas was saying, being able to reason with each other and not being filled with a spirit that can be caused by wine or other things, so that you think just solely on your emotions.
Well, and I would add this too, because I know someone made a statement to my dad on his Facebook page because he was telling me about it. You may have people that are going to come and say, well, they're going to force me to be a Christian. No one can force you to be a Christian. Nobody.
Yeah.
That is there was something that George W. Bush said when he was running for president the first time against Al Gore. And they asked him, they said, are you going to try to stop? Because the overturning of Roe v. Wade, like I've said on this program before, I never thought was going to happen in my lifetime. Thank God it has. But the overturning of Roe v. Wade has been something they've tried to do for a long time. But they asked him, are you going to try to stop abortion? And he said, look, he said, you can't stop that. He said, that's a hard issue. And he said, you have to, someone has to let their heart be changed. And that was a really smart answer, because I don't care what you're doing. If it's going against the word of God, no one can force you to do that.
Yeah.
Just like no one can force you to sin. That's your choice.
Yeah.
You may be tempted, but that's why the Bible says when you're tempted, don't say you're tempted of God, because God cannot be tempted. Therefore, he does not tempt. So God never tries to put you in a position for you to fail. He only puts you in a position for you to succeed.
Yeah.
And I will just leave it off this week with that. Look, understand God's not putting you in a position to fail.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful exchange, everybody. I've enjoyed every second of this. This has been great. I'm simply going to name this episode A Line in the Sand. Do you have one? And if you don't, I'd be happy to hear where you think it should be. And for believers, I can tell you about a book that tells you where your lines should be. And apologies to Madison Cawthorn. That's the guy's name who went through all that stuff, but my bad.
Well, again, Joe Biden tried. He tried. So
yeah, that clip. Send me the link to that. I'll put it in the description for you to watch that, because we don't have video yet, but we're getting there. So everybody, enjoy your week. I hope everybody is safe. Last time we talked about the 4th of July. I hope nobody lost any appendages. Appendages? I don't know. Anyways, phalanges, whatever.
You say that.
I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Please stay safe, and we love you.